Does anybody need water or coffee or anything?
We're so right, it's gonna be hot water if we got it.
Smoke cans also, if anybody needs one.
We got some Anheuser water. Make everybody come. All right. Call the first session order. Welcome everybody. We got a good crowd this place. So we've, got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot to, talk about. If I could, Jason, do you wanna start us off?
Sure, I'll be happy to. For those that don't know me, I'm Jason Risner, I'm the county administrator. So we're in this is a official work session of the Jones County Board of Commissioners. Obviously, we got this set up a little different than normal, and it's that way intentionally so that we can have kind of an open discussion around the table to talk through this issue. And so, just note that this is intended to be the start of the process, and we know that it'll take some time to get it right. The meeting tonight is being recorded and it's being streamed like our normal meetings. Obviously, our audio setup's a little bit different. So if you would, as people are speaking, just speak one at a time and as loudly and clearly as you can, so that those watching can hear us. So I guess to start, Commissioner Kitchens has kind of come up with a proposal that's intended to serve as a starting point for these discussions. And I'm going to send around a handout that we have. If you would just take one of these and pass it around, and we can give that just a second to go around, and then we'll turn it over to Commissioner Kitchens for his remarks on that.
All right, just so everybody knows everybody, you want to do a round of introductions?
Me? I'm Teresa Chambers. I'm with Planning and Zoning Board member.
Deacon Hoyt, planning and zoning.
Arlene Hamilton, Planning and Zoning.
Kyle Presley, planning and zoning.
Tim Petrowski, Planning and Zoning.
John Wood, Board of Commissioners, District 2. Chris Wyman, Chairman, Jones County Board of Commissioners.
Sam Kitchens, District 1.
Fletcher Sams, Altamont River Keeper.
Alexa Holtz, stay-at-home mom.
Dustin Riley, community representative. Eric Varnado, chairman of Jones County Development Authority.
Haley Watson, economic developer, executive director for Development Authority of Jones County.
Tim Ingram, Ingram and Associates Consulting Engineers.
Ashley Brady, county attorney.
All right. That's great. So, the paperwork that Jason sent around, first of all, thank y'all for everybody. Everybody's schedule was busy, lives are crazy. Everybody that took the time out to get to this kind of last minute meeting, but it's very important, obviously, to all of us, to everybody in this community. And so, I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of their schedules to be a part of this. And as Jason said, this is not the last, this is the first. There's a lot more deeper dives than what we'll get into tonight. We usually intend on the meeting lasting an hour, so that's the goal we'll shoot for, recognizing that there are other meetings to be held after this one. So, but the first thing that I threw out there, these are, and I told Jason, I told Chairman earlier, this is just a work session discussion bullet points, and I think just kind of a starting point to give us something to start talking about. I put the very first part as something that I'd like to see, because I think it does a few things. And to back up a little bit, you know, when we start talking about data centers, everybody knows the application that came and what a mega data center or a campus data center is. But that's not the only type of data centers. There's, you know, they call 4 or 5 different data centers, different names, and some less than 2,000 square foot and some over 2 million square foot. So there's a big difference in the types and sizes and the resources required for each different size. So with that, I kind of threw out some, from best I could tell, there are basically 4 types of data centers, and some of them are different sizes, from micro to mini to medium to mega. And some of them go from 0 square foot to 2,000, 2,000 to 5,000, 5 to 20, 20 to 100, 100 to 500. So, with all that being said, I kind of combined some of it. It looked like, the mini or minor data centers that I'm calling them on the first one was anywhere from, 2,000 to 20,000 square feet. And, those are some that we actually have some in Jones County now, that are that type, that really use no more resources than a typical building or a typical, commercial construction or commercial, facility would use. And so that's why I felt like we needed to have a level one and basing it off of square footage and the amount of, utilities or power and water being used. So level one, being less than 20,000 square foot, would be in, could be permitted in a C2 commercial with a conditional use permit, which means that all the other things that with a C2 permit would still be in place. The level two, between 20,000 and 100,000, would be an M2 industrial, again, with a conditional use permit. And we'll get to all the other things that we had put in the first text amendment, the requirements or stipulations that would still go with those conditional land uses. And then the third one is the mega center or campus center. And this is my opinion, we can talk about it, but I wanna put that in a separate pot by itself because it is so big and so much resource. I only think it needs to go into a designed and designated industrial park. And with that, we've already got parameters in our industrial park, and we have a development authority that was put in place years ago that is legislatively designed, that has the authority to ask more questions, put more requirements on things, and they're designated in this square. With all that, it kind of takes some of it out of our hands because we've appointed a board, the state has designated the board and given them the powers and the authority to set design standards and application processes for an industrial park. So I think if we put all level threes, and if we can all agree that all level threes go into a designated industrial park, it kind of takes a little bit off of our plate from developers coming to us, and also, in my opinion, a little bit of worry of the public that these things could go anywhere. And that's the three things that I wanted to hit on to begin with. And then, part two, the environmental impact assessment on the front end, knowing, and a lot of this needs to be in the application of, what do you plan to use? What do you plan to have? The requirements that we put in there, I wanna know when they come with an application, what's the impact on it? You know, what is the water usage? What are the light, the power usage? And then to go along with that, the addressing that with those assessments, gives us the water usage and the noise modeling, the energy consumption, all that. And, but still keeping in there that we reserve the right to ask more questions, because we are still talking about, in this one, basically a 20,000 square foot to 100,000. So if it's 21,000 square foot, we may have less questions. If it's 99,000 square feet, we may have more questions. So that gets us to 3, 4, 5, and 6 were pretty much in the text amendment that we had before. Those are just bullet points I pulled straight out of those. And most of these, just being honest, most of these are kind of geared towards a level 2, because a level 1 is not going to have the resources needed. A level 3 is going to be in an industrial park, so we're talking about an application of a 20,000 to 100,000 square foot facility. And then all of these requirements. And this is the part that I think are just bullet points, but really need to be tweaked in further conversations of, you know, what are the exact requirements are we gonna have, you know, and how does that play out an application. And then the last thing that we didn't have, we had some discussion around it, but is the decommissioning plan. And that is, we need to know upfront with your application, what is your plan? Whether you're in business 5 years or 50 years, what's the plan? And upfront, having a, even a bond or an escrow for amount of money put aside for decommissioning, so that the community's not left and the commissioner's not left holding the bag, if it does go south. So, that was my starting points, and my personal thing for tonight was just to kind of have the discussion around the level 1 and level 2, because I think I hope everybody's in agreement that a level 3 doesn't need to be anywhere other than a designated industrial park. So,
Any questions for planning and zoning, or? Any questions for planning and zoning?
I'll start off.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so I'm gonna capitalize on what Mr. Hal Creek shared with me. And that's the last, next to last, restoration of site to pre-development conditions. And the thought came to my mind whether it's a leased property or owned property, is that gonna make a difference? And we need to spell that out. Let's take Weyerhaeuser, for instance. They own the property and they sell it to a developer, okay? Then the developer can do what he chooses unless we force him to turn it back. Now, if they lease it, let's say it's a 50-year lease, then that kind of changes the dynamics, wouldn't it?
that's probably a part of the conditional use, I would think, and Tim might be able to answer it, but my opinion is, it's the same regardless, because it's the same use of land, whether it's lease to purchase outright, private property, whatever.
Just make sure we don't put that landowner under some stipulations that he wasn't prepared for if he wanted to use it for something else, for instance, or maybe wanted to, cattle farm or whatever, but they were telling him he's got to plant trees back on it. You follow me? I just want to make sure we're aware of where we're going with that.
So basically, define in more detail what, pre-development conditions are, standards for that.
Yes.
If I could just comment.
Yeah.
There was a nice little statement I read that talked about property being restored to an agricultural viable condition. Not necessarily plant trees, but property becomes viable for an agricultural purpose.
Be grass, more trees, so I put it that deal.
You have something in there already for, and Tim, I don't know if it was the solar panels or if it was mitigation towers. It says something in reference to that already. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was referencing somebody else's ordinance for that.
Oh, okay. I did see it in here in one of those other, industrial complexes, but it's much more narrow than this. It was like one line.
Yeah, that is in the cell tower
Okay.
section.
I know when it comes to decommissioning plans, something I've heard from a lot of people in the community is that the big concern is that since these are such purpose-built facilities, should the business go under, should the AI industry collapse, what you end up with is a building that will stay abandoned because it can't readily be adapted into something more useful. And that's what a lot of people really want to avoid.
So I have a question. If, let's just say Jones County builds it, right, and they sell it to another county, who's gonna be responsible for that? Are they gonna be, whoever buys it, are they still gonna be held to the same standard as the first person was?
You think it's a Tim question or a Brody Brinkley question?
So typically, if it was a conditional use, the conditional use runs to the development. So if I sell it to you, you're subject to the conditions of that approval. Same thing with any zoning standards that are in place. If I sold it to you, you're still subject to those zoning conditions.
So like the setbacks and the buffers and things, they would still be responsible for?
Yes.
I had one thing on your level 3, just going real in the weeds on it. How big is the substation at this site?
And the industrial park, there's not a substation.
Okay.
So any application that would come there, that would have to be defined in the application of how do you produce your power needs.
You know, I would, the concern that I have is that the threshold's real low for each one of them, if that makes sense, where you're talking about, 100,000 square feet or 20 megawatts or 900 megawatts for the one that was proposed here. If you look at the Ashley Park transmission line project, is anybody familiar with that? It's in the west part of the state. They're running transmission lines from Heard County through Coweta, through Fulton, into Fayette County to get power to a substation, and they're putting these high-power transmission lines in people's front yard.
Yes.
And so, the reason I bring up the capacity in the industrial park is you might consider another category of just absolutely huge ones where you're going to run into eminent domain issues, getting a substation there and everything like that, where it might be putting a cap on it or putting other parameters on what they would be able to do.
That would be a similar thought I've had too when it comes to making the tier levels. It might be beneficial to have more than 3 different tiers, because then you would be able to really break down size and power usage into better levels.
And it's not on the paper, but you did say add water consumption to these.
Yeah, so that's down under the environmental
Yeah.
impact assessment, so every assessment would assess that, and then in our text amendment from before, we had, the requirements of closed loop, non-evaporative cooling systems, and the amount of water that, whether it was on-site water, county or city water, that type.
But the main thing that I would think, going, just back into block number 1, my big concern would be the hyperscale, or, this new one in Butts County is 11 million square feet.
And then piggybacking off the closed loop, open loop systems, I like specifically prohibiting open loop and evaporative systems, but also in looking into them, they're constantly developing and researching and coming up with more different types of cooling systems. And I do feel like specifying a requirement for closed loop kind of shuts the door on future advancements. And a lot of the data centers, when it's cold outside like it is today, they can throw a couple fans on and use no water. And I feel like we're shutting that out as well as an option, which would further reduce the water requirements for something like this.
I would also say that any evaporative system is just that. You're gonna evaporate some water, so you gotta put some back into it.
Right.
And also, when you're open to the air, you're open to more contaminants. That could mean more flushing and more refilling, with the chemicals for cooling it. I would think the closed loop, you're right though, we don't know what the future holds.
Right.
As far as, technology and advancements, to this. I mean, look at where we've come in 3 years.
Exactly.
Everything that was built prior to 3 years ago, are where we're getting all the horror stories from. So, we've made a lot of changes, so I would agree with that, and I just wanna say something that I think, these bullet points, this is exactly what this work session is for, because we're gonna have people a lot smarter than me, getting into the weeds of it, so that the legal side of it holds exactly what the intent is that we're coming from out of these, so.
Right.
But you made a good point of what if this, when we're talking about 20 megawatts, so I was saying 20 megawatts being the minimum, 20 megawatts to 2,000 megawatts.
Right, no, and I got that, but then I was, just kind of thinking, it's like, okay, well, how big is the industrial, and how close to transmission lines, those kind of.
And there's gonna get to a point where if your fence is the industrial park, and there's 1,000 acres, then that's all you got to work with. So if your project is way bigger than that, and you can't supply your water or your power and all on that 1,000 acres, it's pretty much a done deal. You can't, it won't fit, that project won't fit that location.
And does the county or the city supply water to the industrial park?
County.
County? Okay. It might be in the existing, I work in a lot of counties on this, but I'll come back to that, let me see.
Now, in the square footage under the tiers, are we talking about the footprint of the building or the total land area?
Footprint of the building.
So, will we have some kind of clause in place if they have a larger property and they start wanting to expand more buildings and more buildings, that they would automatically go into a new classification?
Yeah, and I think that putting tight parameters around these, so if you have one that's 19,999 square foot, and you build one that's 10,000, you've now went into that next level. So it's contiguous in your footprint and your property, not per building. Because otherwise, you could essentially have a campus data center with 12 buildings that are all under 20,000 square feet.
Right.
It's just proposed essentially.
So I don't think it was in the existing, but do y'all have a requirement that the applicant is able to be served by the county water system? In other words, you know, if they come, yeah, I was trying to pull it up. So, you know, this is probably more helpful in counties that don't run their own water system, that have like a water authority, but a lot of systems are saying, no, we're overloaded, like, don't bring them in. And so, like a letter saying, we are able to service this requirement that you have.
Yeah, I saw that in there, I think that's a bit, we're not able to control the power grid like that, but absolutely water, you know, if it's county water, are we able to supply it and not put a detriment to everybody else on the system? And if it's if there's just say there's an intergovernmental agreement or agreement with Macon Water Authority, who is close enough by there, that will serve this applicant, that would have to be a letter from them, and the same thing. And I think that to me is a good part about having these type facilities only in designated industrial parks, because they already ask those questions. Our development authority markets that and has for years and years. And so those are the questions they ask for anybody that comes looking at whether it's a tractor supply company or a building trailers, whatever it is. How much water are you gonna need? How much power are you gonna need? How much land are you gonna take up? How loud is it gonna be? All that good stuff is questions asked by the development authority, which is, I don't wanna say it's their job, but that's their job because it is specifically for that. And that's what they were, that authority was created for, to have that authority to ask those questions and find that out ahead of whether we know if it's even a proper fit for Jones County.
Can I touch on that? One of the ordinances I've looked at doesn't even allow wells to be used for water for the data center.
That's what I was gonna get at is,
That was in the proposal.
so I deal a lot with a lot of entities that sell counties this bill of goods saying, oh, we only need this much water and we don't even need a permit because it's right below the threshold, right? But we're gonna build really big wells down here and put in really big pumps, but we don't need it. And, you know, I would say prohibition on drilling wells and being served by the county is probably needs to be spelled out.
I would second that particularly like in the area of the industrial park, a lot of people over there, you know, us included, we rely on well water, and we like having well water. And I think just something this massive, just not allowing them to drill a well would kind of eliminate that and would for sure push them in the direction of municipal water supplies or, you know.
Well, now, Tim speak more to this, but in all fairness, every municipal water supply is well water, you know, from us.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, you know, it's all coming from
Yeah,
generally the same place.
from the same whole of water.
Um,
So do we have any way of measuring if someone, if a company was allowed to build a really deep well? Do we have any way of measuring the impact of that water usage against that source of water that you are about to allow to access it?
I don't question.
Jones County is a very unique facility, or a very unique county. We're on the fault line. When you go into the industrial park, and we have drilled test wells for the county. The east side, Big Sandy goes to the Oconee. Swift Creek goes to the Omogi. The Big Sandy side has groundwater. The other side has none, absolutely none. When you drill, you can only drill about 210 and 215, and you're on bedrock. So they're not gonna go in the industrial park and build a big well. It's not there. It doesn't matter how deep they drill, it doesn't matter where they drill, it's not there.
But that will push the water requirement into the county's water system, which then is gonna take it from the source that we all depend on for water, right?
Which is why we're reverting back to a closed loop system. So if it's 1 million gallons, it's a one-time 1 million gallons, not 1 million gallons a day or a week.
I understand that part, I just wondered if we had a way to gauge the impact.
I don't know that we have a starting
source.
point to gauge from,
I don't either, that's why I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
other than
We
nothing.
So-
monthly check water levels in all the wells. Brandon keeps a list of where pumping water levels, static water levels are. We do that for all 10 wells in the county.
So what would a new 1 million gallon requirement do to us?
The hydrogeology in the fall line area is some of the most complex in the world. It goes up gradient in places. It's wild. It's a box, a blind box.
But then should you prorate that water consumption if it is 1 million gallons over months instead of weeks? I mean, John can tell you from firefighting, we've been in River North and run off hydrant and watch water sprinklers go okay? So you pull 1 million gallons in a few weeks, that's gonna be a big strain, to stretch it out, you follow me?
Time for that system to recover.
I do, but I would depend on our engineers to tell us what effect 1 million gallons would have on us. And also, if 1 million gallons is a one-time purchase, is that an option to purchase from Major Water Authority? So that it does not come from our well water? Or is it is 1 million gallons over a 3-week period, going back to what you talked about, does that harm our water source or our water supply?
If you're talking about, closed loop non-evaporative, which is different than closed loop evaporative, allegedly, it's fill it up and, you know, you're not gonna have any water costs to speak of. And so, allegedly, I don't think they've actually constructed a single one that way. Because, I mean, they've constructed other things using that cooling technology, but not that scale. And, you know, between those two, you kind of have another issue, and it's one that you brought up to me, is that outer loop in a closed loop non-evaporative system is refrigerated basically. And you're adding things to the water to have that ability to run it through the compressors refrigerated. None of those things that are additives to the water are things that you want entering the water table if there's a spill. So, this is gonna be more on your county engineers, but having that primary and secondary containment in case of a fire is the big deal. On that type of system where you've got additives in the outer loop,
Right.
I would, hate for that to get into the groundwater in Jones County.
Which kind of brings up another topic, particularly at the industrial park. There are several natural waterways that traverse that property. And to be able to
Would you be referencing beyond, current state requirements for staying out of buffers?
It's like a 50-foot stream buffer.
I mean, that would be probably sufficient enough.
Yeah, they have to go through an extensive process currently
Yeah.
with the state to be able to get within 25 feet of any state waters.
Right.
So they're not allowed to do anything other than stream crossings in those areas.
Right, that would be something, that would for sure ease a lot of minds around the things to making sure there's no kind of contaminants entering those waterways particularly. And as well as like for the residential side of the park, it kind of pushes that buffer back a little bit further than the ordinance would otherwise have it and keeps it away from people's houses.
Thought from the development authority,
We're just here to listen.
you sitting here listening? No questions? Nice quiet. Anybody want to look?
It might be useful, and I've seen other counties, on your vegetative buffer to specifically call out what you're wanting. You know, I don't want, pine tree that big planted as a buffer, right?
It's currently defined in our
Defined in
ordinance,
the- yeah.
requiring an effective visual screening on the planting,
Got it.
and there's requirements in there for maintenance of that buffer.
Probably would be beneficial too. We know some of these data centers will focus their green space that they'll have on specifically native plant life or, regionally appropriate plant life. And that would also decrease water usage and waste because those kinds of plants are adapted to our kind of environment and the kind of water we naturally get. I think something like that would probably be very beneficial to any of these kinds of campuses.
Palm trees.
Our regulations don't spell out plantings in the buffer, different than when we're having landscaping requirements. Then we get into what kind of vegetation we have to plant.
And that's what it would be more for.
Yeah, and in this situation, it's calling for it to be effectively buffered within 1 year.
Right.
So that, you've got a 65-foot tall building, they're gonna have to leave the
Something
substantial
that's there.
existing vegetation.
Right. Like in the buffer, that I understand. I mean more in like the area they clear cut and that they landscape up when they're done. We would prefer, and it's giving something back to our local environment with, support for pollinators and again, the decreased water usage that native plants would have versus planting a bunch of decorative imports that are gonna require heavy watering.
We have a list of what they are permitted to plant, I'd be happy to get your input on that, because I wouldn't understand that.
For sure, that'd be worth.
We had a list that we created when we were doing
That's the list I'm
That's the-
referencing,
okay.
yes, ma'am.
because we got that from Carl Wheeler at Arnold Wheeler's Nursery, and he provided us the recommendations for native
Right.
plantings.
Anything with planted on?
I'm here going over the noise. And, the measurements to be taken at the boundary verified annually, that word annually has got me jumping because, it doesn't provide for, outside of the ordinary. Okay? And what I mean by that is, let's call it stress requirements. They're working overtime. Who's watching to make sure, or we got residents complaining, okay, noise at night, noisier when it's wet, those kind of things. Is there something in place that lets us keep this in check rather than once a year on the calendar?
Complaint driven, anything complaint driven can be addressed at the time, right?
I think to Mr. Hoyt's statement there, though, we wouldn't want to limit to ourselves of only an annual. We may have a burden on the applicant where they have to submit to us an annual report, but we would want to make it clear that we're going to go out and pull sound levels whenever we want.
As needed.
And that was a long way for public support.
Have we ever done any background noise sampling in rural Jones County?
I have, it's not scientific, I don't have an actual decibel meter, just using my watch, just to try to get an idea.
I guess that's, and I don't think this would apply to the industrial park, but that's my biggest concern is using my phone last night on my porch. I'm the only one out there. and I live in about as rural Jones County as you can be, it's 42 decibels. So is 35 even an attainable goal?
I don't feel like, you know, you gotta think too about, and we're at the industrial park. It's like, there's a lot of OSHA regulations that they have to be followed. Trucks that are backing up have to have a backup alarm, equipment has to have backup alarm. I don't know what the,
Impulse is 140 decibels.
that's what I'm saying, you give them, so, those are gonna have, I got neighbors complaining that when I feed my cows.
Right.
You know, because I got a backup alarm on my tractor and my feed wagon. I'm not taking it off because it's safety reasons, you know, but they don't like that beep. So there's gonna be times that in the industrial park, and it might be times in the other two levels that maybe somebody's taking delivery. There's gonna be some times that they can't meet this. I agree, you're talking about the 45. We're over 45 now, I'm sure. Just this conversation we're having, and that's gonna be, for the industrial park, that's gonna be, I mean, let's just throw it out. Somebody else comes in here wanting to go to the industrial park. You're not gonna be able to maintain that. I mean, that's what it is, an industrial park. It's gonna generate noise, and we got to expect that, you know.
So throw that out to the level 3.
And that was, I was gonna mention that too, Chairman, that when I don't wanna say let's separate the level 3s, but if the level 3 can only go in one design place right now, that design place, which has a board that vets all this stuff, needs to be looking at that. I don't think we need to get, and I don't wanna say, cause we are elected officials and we are charged with doing it at the end of the day, but I don't think we should have a board and an authority created by legislative action, and then we give them the authority to vet this stuff, and then start stepping on their toes, telling them how we think we ought to do it. Flip side of that, we are the gatekeepers at the end of the day, so we are the ones that say, if we're gonna talk about this on a level 2, it's definitely gonna be talked about in a level 3. Does it need to be 35 and 45 in an industrial park? I would think common sense would tell me probably not, but it has to be considered, because it's not an open gate, because but then again, we have 1,000 acres, so there's a difference than that, than being 100-foot buffer on 500 acres, and you have a 480-foot facility on 500 acres, or 480 acres.
I'm getting off topic to another page now, but do we need to debate the neighborhood commercial to industrial zoning, the way it's written, the amendments?
Well, I was thinking that this kinda helps some of that, kinda clears some of it, because right now, the only one that I think would be a discussion, because level 3 is going in industrial park, level 1 has no impact on noise, light, resources, any of that. So level 2, we're talking about the 20 to 100,000 square feet. So we're looking at a building this size, or a building the size of Ingalls, or the, storage buildings over here. So, as long as the criteria, I'll call them restrictions, the amendment restrictions that we put in place are in place on a level 2, C2 area, I think if we're gonna talk about it, I think that's the part to talk about, instead of, are they allowed or not allowed in the C2, because we've got them now at less than 20,000 in a C2.
Yeah, the allowable uses for M2, the last thing on there is solar panel farms, or solar panels. Here we are crossing the threshold of data centers. Do we need to include it in M2? That's all I'm saying.
Include what now?
Data centers.
As a listed item.
To me,
That is what the first bullet point does, is proposes to create that as a conditional use in the C2 district.
So, item 33, right after solar panel, small solar systems, am I correct?
No, sir, not the way that, that first bullet point is. It's saying a conditional use, not a permitted use. 33 would be a permitted use.
Okay.
I think we can all pretty much agree that a data center don't belong in a C1 neighborhood, commercial. Like, that was a big sticking point with a lot of the people.
When you say data center, you mean like that?
Like the big
that
guy.
application?
Yeah, that's what,
You know,
that's
like,
why,
be kind of like a little server farm that an individual business might have to serve their personal needs, that's one thing. That's an extension of that business, and it's not really disruptive to the natural resources. But when you come to something that has this massive of a footprint, and conserves this amount of resources, it just flat out doesn't belong in something that shares space with barber shops and pet stores.
And I think it maybe just came out of the chute that way, when it shouldn't have said C1 ever.
Yeah,
Okay, I think we can all agree on that.
yeah. And I
Why
think
did it?
Why did what?
Why did we just say C1? It's been like the question on my mind for
I
me.
can address that.
All right.
The thought process was is if the data center fell through, now we've got 1,000 acres zoned in the heavy industrial, just sitting there for anything else to walk in. Whereas if it was C1, then we're limited to pet shops and barber stores. That was the thought process.
Hmm.
So we asked for C1, falls through, which these are highly speculative, we recognize that. We didn't want 1,000 acres of M2 sitting there, basically.
Right, because the zoning can't go backwards.
Yes.
thank you, Tim. Just like you're sitting up here with.
So can I turn another page?
Sure.
Do we need to have any special guidelines or regulations around the construction period for something like this in the category level 2? Is it gonna be intrusive enough and major enough that there need to be any parameters put around it specifically for that?
I don't know how far down the road y'all got with the developer, but the state doesn't have the power infrastructure to provide a 900 megawatt data center with power. And so the way that they're typically built is they'll build 100 megawatts a year over about a 10-year period to build one of these hyperscales. And so you're gonna be dealing with bare dirt, traffic, all that for 10 years. So yeah, I would recommend.
And I'm thinking about hours of operation, if they get in a bind on a schedule and they wanna run 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, and they're sitting in a place that's not real acceptable, do we need to have some guidelines that might prohibit some of that?
So I think it goes back to what I wanted to put the only place eligible for them is the industrial park.
Sure.
So if they wanna run 24/7 in the industrial park, as long as their noise, their light and all that don't impede what we're talking about for the neighbors around there, it's an industrial park. And I think we're gonna have to, I mean, we're gonna get the elephant out of the room, I think. An industrial park is designed, built, and marketed as an industrial site. If we're ever gonna think that we're gonna have a quiet neighborhood inside of an industrial park, 1,000-acre industrial park, we're not
I'm talking level
getting it head
2.
on.
I'm talking level 2, not
Right.
an industrial park.
Well, that we're specifically talking about like during the construction period itself.
Yeah.
Like the operations we know will be significantly quieter than the construction
Right.
period would.
And I think a lot of it is, and I know I build buildings, and I know the construction period, in every building that I've ever built, the developer, the owner, and the contractor don't wanna stretch it out for 10 years. They wanna get, the time is money, and their general conditions is based on the dollar amount per month that they're working. So they wanna do it as quick as possible. Now, if there's a long-term plan of a 10-year plan of a million square foot per year, that's known on the front side. A lot of this is known up front, and I think that goes into weighing, do we want a 10-year project, working? Do we wanna work with a 10-year project, or say, no, you can build 4 buildings the first year, and then you're good?
Well, even then, it's like, and I know like even in that area, a lot of people wouldn't mind, like especially during the day when everyone's at work. That's the working hours of the day. There's gonna be cement trucks beeping, cranes in the air, all the associated construction noise. But then at 8, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, when folks are trying to get their kids into bed, there's still gonna be the same jackhammers going, backhoes digging. And I think that's what one thing she had mentioned.
I'm just gonna say, I remember, we're talking about a building that's half the size of a Walmart. This isn't a,
Yeah, we're still talking about
we're
level
level
1 and
two.
2, right?
Yeah, we're talking about level 2. We're only talking about half of Walmart. This isn't something that would drag on.
Right.
I did have a question, like, on this line of thought. Elsewhere in the ordinance, what does, enforcement authority look like? Is it like a fine schedule? What are y'all able to do?
Write tickets, take them to court.
That's cost of doing business with a lot of these accounts.
That too, and then when you're talking about multi-billion-dollar enterprises, $1,000 fine would be cheaper than just complying with the regulation. And we wanna avoid a situation like that, where for them, it's like, well, we'll just keep paying the tickets, because that saves us more money in the long run than trying to fit in with what the county wants.
This would be an order from a judge, and then they'd be in contempt of court.
Right, I was gonna speak, finishing a construction project the past year. About, you have to work with the developers, you have to work with the weather. The weather's probably your biggest, factor in that. These guys are gonna come out at 4 o'clock in the morning and start going out pop trucks, just whenever they get their concrete. They're not talking about pouring a sidewalk, you're talking, even on an 8,000 square foot building, we're gonna do a 4 o'clock in the morning pour, so we're gonna get there at 2 o'clock. And they're gonna be working until 2 o'clock the next afternoon. They're done, they're going home.
Right.
So they won't be out there at 9 o'clock in the night, but they'll be 2 o'clock in the morning, we're gonna be.
And I know those kinds of things, 'cause like my dad's been in construction for 40 years. So there's a lot of those kinds of details I am aware of. But it's more like a regular and continuous type of interruption.
And I think you know a lot of that on the scale and size of the project when you first start talking about it. Because if anybody tells me I can build a 3 million square foot building, pad, concrete and all that in 4 months, trust me, we can do it.
You don't use them.
Trust me.
They might can build a building, but they're not gonna be plumbing and electrical.
They're gonna forget something on the way.
Can I ask a question? I know I'm not at the table, but Fletcher was bringing up about, I don't think he was talking about them building the buildings was the problem. The problem is they don't have enough electricity to run what they're wanting to run. Is that not what you were talking about?
Really, what was top of mind is like,
They do it in stages.
well, no, like, not the construction time, but like, that got me thinking of enforcement of like noise ordinance, if we're talking about a level 2 that's like running super loud. That's why I was asking.
Well, is the level 2 gonna be able to have the power though?
Oh, and level 2 is
Okay.
Yeah.
not big.
The power consumption thing really comes into play in the larger ones.
I got a lot of things in my watershed that are that size, and I don't have the time to prioritize that.
Okay.
But 900 megawatts, that gets my attention.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Might get out of here in under an hour at this rate. Paul, you got anything?
I do. Can I ask another one?
Okay, come on. Hey, for the record, would you come forward and get one of these microphones, or get where you can be, and just introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Kay Norris.
Come on up here close. Just go get by Miss Brody. I'm sure that
She probably don't
microphone
want me
can
sitting
hear
next to
you.
her.
Yeah, you can sit here on.
No, I'm Kay Norris. I live down on 18. I had a question about the closed loop water. Y'all see, it goes in, how many ever million gallons? Does it never have to go in again? That doesn't go anywhere? They have to top it off? Like, what's the reason for topping it off? It's just natural
Ken's
evaporation?
the engineer, he can explain that.
Part of it is depending on the water source, it gets so nasty from being recycled. You have to, it loses its ability to cool. so
Well,
you
what
have to-
happens with that nasty water?
If it's in the industrial park, it'll go in the sewer system.
What if there's not a sewer? Okay, but if there's not a sewer system?
Then they have to build one.
Okay, okay. My second question was, to be, devil's advocate here, not saying I want this to happen, but if it catches fire, is the fire department big enough to fight this?
I don't know, they have, the one that was originally planned for 18, they had their own tanks and their on fire pumps and on firefighting system.
Which is another good thing about the industrial
Industrial.
park, there's a fire station there, so
Right.
any discussion I would almost assume that that discussion is around there, whatever's built there has to be maintained, and I would say we would put that on the developer to say, if it's a certain chemical that needs to be at that fire station, if they were already talking about putting their own tanks and stuff in to handle that.
Even with the level twos, the smaller ones, we're talking, they would still have to have their own,
I think a level
Some of those
two,
are in your codes as far as, suppression.
Yeah, and I couldn't comment to what like suppression requirements would be for this type of facility. I have never run the numbers on something like that. A building of comparable size, though, typically is going to be sprinklered. If you've got a 100,000 square foot mercantile building, it's going to be fire sprinkled.
Yeah, there are building codes for fire safety that would come into play.
Okay.
So a
I
lot,
was
lot of
just-
that's already in play in this,
okay.
years past.
I just wanted to make sure because you don't ever know what's on the inside you don't want it, the way y'all were talking, you don't want it to come on the outside.
There's usually requirements for primary and secondary containment
Okay.
for fire.
Cause I know where we live on 18, where you were talking about, I put, yeah, those are fire stations, but nobody mans it.
Sure.
So, that's what I was wondering.
Looking for a job?
No.
Thank y'all.
I appreciate it.
The city got anything? Mayor Pro Tem?
I just want to say thank you for inviting the city to come out tonight. Myself and John came out, like many of you, here to learn and learn more about, the process and what y'all are doing. I want to thank the commissioners for taking the time to learn a lot of this. I know a lot of this is newer, kind of uncharted territory for some of y'all. Same here, big reason I came out tonight was to learn. I get the concerns on both things. I mean, to anything in life, there's pros and cons. This county has invested a lot of money in an industrial park with the intent to help the tax base for the county. I think a lot of us consider, like I said, I'm still learning about the data centers along with a lot of you, but a lot of things to consider are the pros and cons of any other industry we're gonna have here. Look at Sadler's, Tennessee, lost 19 lives this last week at a plant that had its second explosion in the last 5 years. When you look at the grand scheme, is a data center better or worse than that? You look at solar fields. I know all the issues we've had with solar fields, and we've seen so much of the state covered in them now, and the problems we're having with them. Looking back, you look at bleach or other chemical plants that we have. So I'd be interested because I know a lot of people have come to me and said they're not as vocal as others that have come to me and said they want some industry here. Out of the choices in life, this seems like some of the better choices. And appreciate that the commissioners have taken the time to make sure that it is done right. That's a big thing I've always talked about. If you're not growing, you're dying, but it is about the right growth. It is about the right pace and the right type of growth for your county and for your situation. So I want to thank y'all for coming, or inviting us to come tonight to speak with y'all and be here with y'all. And I'm sorry about some of the things that have been said about y'all. Where y'all have taken the moment to handle this properly. And, things like showing up at your house. I was telling Tim being posted online, who's an employee of the county, who does the right thing and just goes by what's written and decided by y'all. And people posting his picture online and saying that we have to find him. So I appreciate what y'all have gone through. I know it's been a tough couple of years for y'all. So thank you for doing what y'all do. And thank you for continuing the research, and thank you for inviting us.
I got a personal thanks to Mr. Kitchens, because you have put a lot of work in this. You've always been my wingman, because when I'm not able to, and you've taken up a lot of slack over the last couple of years with my shortcomings, and we couldn't do it without you.
well, thank you, but we're all in this together.
Right.
Everybody at this table has put more into it than we can know. Everybody's done their homework, everybody's done their research, and I think it shows. James, we all say we signed up for this and knew what we were getting into, and yes, I'm taking donations for a new delete button, because I've used mine up, backspacing and deleting comments, but, yeah, I personally believe we're doing the right thing, we're looking at all the right aspects of it. I've been questioned we would have people at the table that don't have any authority, don't have a vote, don't have a say in it. And I just say, why wouldn't we? If we're honestly doing the best thing for Jones County, everybody in this room is all about Jones County, so why would we not get all the opinions? That some of our people that are sitting here have done more homework than I'll ever do, because they were that passionate about it, and I think that's value brought to the table. So I'll argue with anybody that don't think this is the way things should go. You won't convince me otherwise. So we at the end of the day, everybody maybe go, well, I disagree with every vote that the commissioners did, but at the end of the day, that's what everybody says, this is what you were hired to do. You're exactly right. You were hired to do this, to make these decisions, and I think we make them based on the best information you have at hand. Otherwise, you can't make the best decisions. So,
And I'll say too, even on the people we've talked to that are just, have been opposed to the last data center all the way around, there's NIMBYs in every group, but by and large, people are okay with growth and development in Jones County. And in the appropriate spots, at the appropriate size, in line with what the plan for the county is and what already exists in different areas, people will be okay with something like a data center as long as the right protections are in place to protect the things they care about. Because like you see, the horror stories that people see online from the earlier wave of these things that just came in, destroyed communities, destroyed natural resources, that's all anybody has to go off of. And as long as we have something comprehensive in place that can address the things people care about, then we know that the developer that comes here will be somebody who wants to play ball and respect the land that they build in.
Biggest thing is education. It's kids that on this side. And I've chased for 10 years in other towns that we've had a public come in. And this board is sitting up here behind us, we'd sit there and get ready to make a decision. So somebody would come up and say, have y'all thought about that? And I've seen this board just stop and look. We haven't.
Right.
Because it takes input from everybody. No, we haven't. And this board has changed their mind before, where people have brought ideas or thoughts or, and we thought about this. And that's, accountability and transparency is for all of us. And, having input from communities is a must. And I think we all agree at the end of the day, this county needs economic development.
Oh, sure.
We've been 2.5, 3 years, if anybody followed what we've gone through the last year, it hadn't been a fun 3 years. You sit there and you got the state telling you that you failed your third audit. You got people in place that don't want to do the right thing, but we have to go and fix that, and the people we put in that places have been phenomenal to get us where we're at. But it's gonna fix all this. It's gonna take economic development. That's not the way.
And I will say, as far as economic development goes, there are different ideas that I'm gonna be sharing with the board over time as we continue with this discussion that would be able to grow our economy and our tax base without necessarily becoming reliant on big things like this. We know this would be a massive boost tax-wise, but there are also smaller bets we can make along the way, more neighborhood-focused local bets that would really do the same thing. Like I've mentioned several times to people about looking at things in terms of tax value per acre instead of just one big lump sum. Because you can get smaller, something in line with the historic main streets and little town squares that made up Jones County to begin with, and start to really boost that tax base without drastically changing people's neighborhoods.
And I'll say this, a lot of people, we've been blasted before about, why don't you get a Walmart here? Why don't you get a Chick-fil-A here? We don't get people here. They come here because they want to land here, and we have to just make the opportunity the best that we can. And we've talked about this, we've denied some zoning, we've approved some zoning to make the growth corridor where you want it. So you want people to land along Gray Highway from Macon to Gray, instead of them coming to say, well, here's a cheap piece of land over here, we wanna put it over here. It doesn't fit over there, it fits in here. And so when you put parameters around you to where you want, retail or commercial or anything to go, it kind of limits you to what wants to come here. And they,
Right.
but the things that they see that you're, the community we have is what brings them here. Our schools, our sheriff's department, our people, that's what brings people to Jones County to want to develop. And we've got to have a healthy growth, and a healthy, diverse growth in Jones County. So that's why we do what we do, but it's really hard to kind of create different opportunities, if those type of businesses are not wanting to, if it's not in their market, plan or in their portfolio to build here, we can, you know, try to honeymoon them all day, but if they're not interested,
Right.
they're just not interested in that.
And I know too, a big criticism we hear about the county is that it's just filling up with gas stations, big box stores, and drive-throughs. And that eventually Gray Highway will be indistinguishable from 75 to Millersville. Because it'll just be the same McDonald's, Dollar Store, BP over and over and over and over.
And I would argue with that because I've done a lot of market studies and working with this in my job because of the FTEs and the people go and the students go to the school where they're living at and where they're at. And so the market studies show that we're not oversaturated with, and everybody makes the joke about Mexican restaurants and chicken houses, you know, chicken restaurants. They're not going out of business. There's a line at the drive-through, so obviously, and banks and churches, but obviously when they're full and when they're doing good business, they're making money, they're staying here.
Oh, yeah.
And so I get it, but again, we don't entice people that we want to come here, they come here because they want to be here, and then we make parameters for that. But, I mean, I get it, it's hard to justify why you have 9 gas stations, but when 9 gas stations have cars sitting at them and they're pumping gas, that's still money coming into the county.
Because we just don't want to risk the county just becoming an extension of Macon sprawl.
Yeah.
Because all that's gonna do, that clogs up the streets, that makes our streets unsafer for people, you know. People want Gray to be an area where you can get out and walk around. You know, they call it Grayberry, but it's starting to look less and less like Mayberry, and starting to look more and more like Pinehole. And it's like, those are things that are rooted in the zoning code, I know for sure, that we'll have to, over time, really start getting our heads around to try and encourage the kind of development we want in different areas. Because like we're not gonna get rid of a highway commercial corridor. We all know that, and that's gonna have its benefit in its place. But you also want your neighborhood, like I know somebody was telling me about the Joy Cliff area, that the way that whole area is set up is just degrading into blight. And they don't like that. They feel like that part of Joy Cliff should really serve more neighborhood-focused businesses for that area. That isn't just big parking lot, big drive-through, big tow yard or repo lot. Like, these are the kinds of things, and like I said, when you go in that direction and follow more of a value per acre metric, you really start seeing that tax base grow incrementally in ways that benefit without drastically changing the neighborhood people live in.
Well, the problem we see on Gray Highway, Joy Cliff Road, we have no sewer. Everything's septic tank. And if you've lived here in the county long enough, eventually your septic tank's gonna quit. And so, until we develop sewer and we can take the sewer and treat it properly, we're not gonna see a lot of development.
Right.
I mean, just because it's not gonna, it's not.
And that goes back to like what I said about small beds, because when you have a smaller or an infill type development, you're not relying on that massive expansion of the infrastructure, trying to play catch up to support that area. You get that little boost in the tax base, which allows more investment into these types of things.
Well, years ago, and how long you've been out here, but years ago, there was a Fox Pizza there on Gray Highway. It didn't last 2 years. The health department shut it down because the septic tank was running across the ground. And it was a carry-out only business.
And that's absolutely something we would need to invest in over time to better set the county up for better growth.
You know, I'm gonna make a comment, like I said, I want prospects to feel comfortable coming to us. they need us as much as we need them. And I want them to feel comfortable coming to us and have round table discussions just like we're having now. Tell us what you can do for the, what you can do for the community. I think they're willing to do that. And I mean, just not the data center, but anything that comes through. You know, let's pick on number 3, level 3. I mean, we've got the state's marketing this, our industrial authority marketing. We've had a lot of interest. And I want them to feel like when they come down, that they can sit down and say, hey, we're interested. What do we need to do? And this is what we can do. And that's what we need yes, we need to roll out the red carpet. But we need to let them know that that red carpet, you know, has concern. And if we can't have a win-win at the end of the day, you know, we're not gonna make it.
And that's where, you know, like the regulations, the rules, community benefit agreements that a lot of communities have gotten into with these things. These are things that make people individually more comfortable with something like a data center coming in. Because it's all risk reward. You know, when that risk looks like it outweighs that reward, that's when you get such the high-pitched vocal opposition of just no, blanket no, get out. And we don't want that either. You know, we want the right person, the right company, the right development to come in, even in terms of a large data center. But we want them to respect Jones County in the process, not just see us as a bunch of hicks that they can take advantage of. Because they can wave a check around and we'll all be like, oh, cool, and then ignore the damage they might do later down the road. And if we, I feel like with the right guardrails in place, the right, like a tier system like this, as far as I know, only DeKalb County in Georgia has a tier system like this. And we could really be setting a standard here that the rest of the state or even the rest of the country looks at us and they're like, they did it right. We should follow their lead. And then we're not just protecting us, we by default protect Twiggs County, Wilkinson County, Lawrence County, all the other communities around here that may not know as much about these things, but all they see is, I pull it up online and it's wells go dry and power grids crash. We want to set everybody up for success.
You and I had this conversation and talking about data centers, and I said, you know, we've got to think. My wife used to work at the phone company, and I said, me and you were talking, and it looked up, we've already got one. Been here 40, 50 years.
Right.
Huh? Well, it was it Windstream?
Windstream.
We already got one. Haddock's got one. You know, I called those guys in and I was telling him, he goes, yeah. I mean, they got everything data center. They got a whole bank of batteries on the wall.
By all
Oh, yeah.
definition of data center.
If fiber goes, I mean, he said, yeah, everything.
And then even when it comes to like the bigger ones, when you see the difference between the ones that actually are part of internet infrastructure, cloud computing, those kinds of things, at this size, they're still not using the kind of resources an AI data center uses. It's really this new wave of AI data center construction that's like, we want all your water, all your power, give it to me now. So it's like, that's why I feel like having the tiers and the different, even if we have to break it down more to satisfy more specific niche cases, that's gonna be a major benefit, because we can show that we're welcoming to the smaller ones, we're welcoming to the types of data centers that won't use massive resources, but then if you are going to use a lot of resources, this is the things we need you to follow, and these are the parts of the community we need you to get back to specifically to make sure that the county gets something for that trade-off. You know, that's where I like a lot of the community benefit agreements these things get into, because then you can really direct money towards things like the animal shelter, the foster care system, I know Maddie Wells, you know, that's where I went to school growing up. It's very overfull and underserved. You know, that whole side of the county kind of gets the raw end of the deal a lot. And especially if you're building in that industrial park, you need to be giving back to that side of the community through more than just property taxes to the county. And these are things that with a community benefit agreement for the bigger guys, you know, the littler guys less so. But for the bigger guys, you get something like that in place, the residents in the area see, well, we might have to deal with a bunch of construction problems for a few years, but the school's gonna get some major renovations out of it. The 49 Rec Center's gonna get sponsorship going on out there, you know. We'll get a new park or something.
See, now you started, he's already over to my splash pad.
So,
Oh
no
I
splash
saw
pad.
that video too.
All right, this means almost over, I can see that.
All right, since we got the splash pads, anything else? Yes.
Might ask a question. I know you mentioned some saying the other day, we got an idea on what kind of tax base we're talking about from a center like this around the state or other states? What kind of property taxes we're looking at from a center like this?
Depending on the size, I mean, it's all over the place, but.
I'm saying like roughly the one that had been proposed.
Tim, you know anything, rough numbers of ones that they've already established that we're seeing, or?
Well, it's, they thought,
We got a real rough thumbnail,
yeah,
and I can't stress rough enough, y'all, okay, because there's a whole lot of unknowns.
a lot of assumptions.
Assuming, assuming it took 3 years to build it, so you're starting it up somewhere around 2030 or something like that. And assuming, this is based upon the information he gave, okay, that's just what we, I'm sorry.
Crooked Creek.
Yeah, thank you.
The one that had.
Cantaloupe.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one that had the.
You're looking at, and assuming they change out their servers every 6 years. It was like $54 million in tax revenue the first year, and then it starts 24 the next. It works itself down to about 14 million, and then at year 7, it starts over.
From depreciation. And then year 7 goes back to year 1.
So it's no doubt, it's a massive windfall, and it would definitely allow the county, particularly on some of the infrastructure we talked about with sewer and water and things like that, it would allow us to get ahead on a lot of projects. And we would be able to stop being so reliant on SPOS to get things done. You know, it would help in a lot of aspects of this community.
You take a large burden off your housetops, the
Oh,
rooftops.
yeah, for
if
sure.
you're residential, and you're older, you might, depends on how it goes, you might be able to come in here and say 65 and over, school taxes.
Right, and my dad's getting to that point too.
There's some attributes that
I
you need.
know, I remember when you were.
What was y'all's budget last year? I know ours, but what was your budget saying?
27, 28.
28, 29 million.
So when you think about, I mean, there is some pros to that. I know, to use your phrase, we don't want someone in here taking advantage of the rednecks, I believe is what you said. Sometimes the rednecks are smart and learn how to take advantage of the people with the money to bring it into our community to get stuff like that. I wouldn't
Exactly.
worry about just the penny and dime for a school project, because we'd have plenty of money for projects all over the county. So I think there's, like I said, there's always, need to consider the benefits also.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, any of these things, it's gonna be a risk reward. And you want the community to see the reward as being higher than the risk. Because people can tolerate some level of risk if the reward's good enough. But just saying, you know, oh, well, we're getting the property tax. Well, we know, especially from the way people have attacked y'all, which none of us agree with, that doesn't sit well enough with people. They wanna see, and I've heard it pushed a lot from other people, and there's even the signs around the community that talk about the community benefit agreements. And that allows us specifically, you know, we know they fund STEM programs at schools, which, you know, trains our kids to be able to work at these things. Because we don't want them just pulling people out of Atlanta or pulling people from wherever to come work there. We want some of our kids that are coming out of the high school to be able to one day work there. So, you know, there's ways to make sure that money gets directed around while also getting the property tax benefit. You know, we're talking about multi-billion-dollar companies. That's a lot of money.
And I feel comfortable saying that with the Development Authority, just about every project that has looked at us or talked to us, that has been a part of the discussion of it. But it's not a discussion on the front end where you can say, okay, 20,000 square foot, you gotta put X number of dollars, 50,000, you got,
Right.
depending on who it is, and if they wanna land here, then you start talking about, okay, what else are we gonna get out of this, and what benefit can we get?
And it
But
would
those are
definitely be
things that we absolutely know, the college and career pathways. I mean, that is almost a must on anything for us, because that's
Right.
huge. That's a direct pipeline from our kids going into a workforce.
Right.
And meaningful jobs at the end of the day.
And that, having that staged, you know, the setup of, well, at this level, we can do this for you, but then you can't get to this next level of approval or permitting until we reach a certain stage. Because a lot of people, they have a problem with it coming in, and then it's like, well, we've got 2 weeks, or we've got 30 days to make all the decisions up or down, and that's that, we can't say anything else. And people don't want that. People are going to oppose something like that, so that people want time to go through the data, what are we getting out of it, what are we losing and trading off for it. And to really get community approval, it's gonna have to hinge on that. Well, we can approve you here, but you're not gonna get to this next level of approval to be able to keep going until we meet some qualifications along the way.
But like I said, at the end of the day, it's our whole community. You know, we're making, you know, comment, you work for us, we work for the whole community, and we're good in the whole community. And I'll be honest with you, I've actually had more support of hoping they will come. You know, I love, I mean, the education part, I cannot, I don't know how you educate people that don't want to sit there and listen. And those are the ones that you get frustrated with. You try to tell them, they don't want to listen, you know, 'cause my neighbor told me to. You know. So my neighbor was told me that, that's what kills you. That's, you said, it gets disheartening, you know, when we sit there. I'll not tell you, Commissioner Kitchens, I've been there this 10 years. We give our heart and soul to this community. There's been days here recently, if I lost my mind, what am I doing here? You know, why am I doing this? I do it because I love my community. Huh?
A little bit.
What's that?
Take a left job.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
tell everybody, I've got crocodile boxer shorts now, the alligator didn't make it. But, hey, we got some people here, got some, soccer, don't you have a soccer game too?
It's over.
Oh,
It's
it's
at
over.
6, yeah, that's all right.
I know, I've got a couple, so we got soccer. We're sitting, we'll come up with another date to meet. Maybe we'll have some more information that we can, share.
We have some emails that we would love to send everyone at the board.
Yeah,
sure.
We have our own proposal of a tiered system. We have 5 tiers versus 3, just again, some ideas. And then, some benefit agreement proposals as well as regulations that would be in addition to what we already had in the previous amendment. That I emailed everybody.
Jason, the easiest way to send it to Shannon and have her distribute it.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
That'd be great. Anything else?
You got Shannon's email.
I do.
I just want to point out, we do have a timeline going on the amendment. It'll be going to the planning commission on November 17th. I think that's the date.
Timeline on the amendment.
Y'all made a motion at the last meeting to begin the amendment process.
And
And
there's
so
a
that,
sunset on the decision for it.
we've advertised that meeting date for November 17th.
Oh,
So if we
okay.
need to adjust, then we can take steps there. Or perhaps the county, the planning commission tables the item at their agenda if we need to continue working on this.
So we've got a lot more information since that motion too.
I think it's November 17th. It's the 3rd Monday in November.
All right. Anything else?
17th, that's right.
Anybody from the audience? It is a county work session. None? Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you for having us.